My phone rings just as I get off the phone with the lighthouse. And he said, "Commissioner, we've had 2 explosions at the finish line." So I said, "What kind of explosions, Danny? Were they electrical?" Because we had electrical problems in that area, in the grid. It was a scene of devastation. It reminded me of 9/11, actually, the way people were clutching each other in the street, and it was total chaos. And when I put my feet down on the ground, I could feel shrapnel, tacks, and BBs under my feet. And I knew immediately that it was a improvised explosive device. He said, "Commissioner, we're in a shootout with these guys right now and they're throwing bombs at us." And I sat bolt upright in the bed and I said, "What do you..." I'd never heard that in American policing, that they're throwing bombs at us. It just wasn't something I had even considered a possibility. I had 2,000 really angry police officers that day who wanted to do nothing but run these guys down.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wearing the Badge. We're going to have some fun this evening. It's evening here in Chicago. I've got a great friend of mine, Ed Davis here, who we've determined that we've known each other just about 20 years.
Yep.
And it kind of reminds me of a friend of mine who I played baseball with in college. There was one guy on my college baseball team from Boston.
Yeah.
And this is in the days of Bucky effing Dent. And
A legend.
he and I are still going back and forth. And I got to tell you, Ed and I do this all the time. We go back and forth with the Boston, New York rivalry. It was a lot more fun when they weren't winning. But that has changed. At least the Knicks gave us a little salvation this year by knocking out the Celtics. But, we always talk about the Red Sox and the Yankees because I'm from the Bronx. But I just got to throw in that I was at 2 Patriots-Giants Super Bowls. And the first one was the Tyree catch on the helmet.
Oh, nice.
And the second one was the undefeated Patriots, who lost to the Giants, who made the playoffs at 9-7.
Yep. Why do you remember that?
Well, the most fun part of that game was seeing all the Patriot fans after the game.
Yep.
And, they were all dejected. And I was like, hey, keep your head up, man. 17-1 is a great year. They were like, oh, bang.
That hurts. Yeah, that hurts.
So, but Ed and I have really developed a great relationship over the years. I think the world of him. And you'll understand why when you hear him speak, which you may have heard him speak. He does have some fame. Ed went on the police department in Lowell, Mass. in 1978.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I was just out of high school at that time.
Yep.
You were only a couple of years older, but
Yeah.
But you got me by seniority. And basically went up through the ranks and held just about every rank. And you did so much there. I'm going to let you fill in the details. But he was the chief in Lowell for 11 years or 12 years,
yeah.
which is unheard of. Certainly today in this environment, you see chiefs, it's a merry-go-round. You get to know somebody and suddenly they're gone. But Ed went on to be the commissioner in Boston, where he did a fantastic job as far as reducing crime. And that's where Ed and I really hit our stride, if you will. I was in Newark at the time, and we met through Major City Chiefs Association, which is an organization that he and I are both lifetime members of at this point.
Right.
And we make sure that we go to those conferences because it's actual work that gets done. And I'm not sure that most people understand that. But having said that, Ed, fill in some blanks for us. Tell us about, Lowell, how it was there back in the dark days of the 70s.
Sure.
When I wasn't a police officer.
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for having me on here. It's great to catch up with you, come up here and renew old acquaintances. But I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about policing because it's been my life's work. And even though I've been in the private sector now for 10 years, I still dabble in it as someone who works in security. And so going to those meetings and, like you said, keeping our relationships with the colleagues that we've had over the years is really important, and I enjoy it. But I started in 1978, as you said. I came from a police family. My father was a police officer. My brother Jack, who just recently passed away, was a police officer for 30 years. And
Another thing we have in common.
right,
My dad was a New York City cop. My brother was a New York.
yeah,
True.
your dad was quite a famous guy in New York, and a guy from World War II that had,
Infamous.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's you are clearly proud of the work that he did, and you followed his footsteps. And I like to think I did the same thing. So, one interesting side note that is, my dad not only was a police officer and a detective, but he also ran the local ambulance service. So
Wow.
when I was a kid, we used to have 6 or 7 ambulances in the backyard parked near the house, and he'd always be running out to go to a call. Or it was a very interesting experience. I remember him teaching us CPR in the 1960s when we were little kids, showing us how to do it and the different things, the different first aid things. So we were always involved in sort of crisis and emergency response in my family. So I naturally followed in his footsteps, went on in 78. And my first job was as a route officer. So I didn't have a police car. I was assigned to a particularly tough area of the city. And because I was the biggest guy in my class, so they put me in this area called South Street and Back Central Street. And we had about a dozen liquor establishments there that we had to close down every night. 3 strip joints, a pornographic bookstore, and a lot of sort of street level drug dealing and
Sounds
criminal
like a good
activity.
time.
Well, yeah, it was a great way to cut your teeth. I'll tell you that. You saw a lot of things.
Did you twirl your stick?
Well, I did actually.
Yeah,
Matter of fact,
back in the day. We
yes.
used
As
to
a
do
matter of
that.
fact, one of my supervisors yelled at me for doing that. I was walking up the street and.
My
and-
dad taught us all how to do that.
No
when we
kidding.
were
Huh?
kids,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a New York thing, but I figured I'd pick it up because I always envied you being in the NYPD, best department in the country. Yeah. So I walked the route for a year and a half, and then I was assigned a police cruiser in the neighborhood I grew up in. So I went from one bad neighborhood to another, but the second one was a bad neighborhood where I knew everybody.
Yeah.
And it was crazy times in the 1970s. I remember going to a loud party call, and I walked in, and there were probably 50 or 60 people in a small apartment, and they were all friends of mine. And as you walk in the door, there was
All right, here's a beer.
yeah, well, yeah, that was part of it. They try to get you to drink. Of course, I tried not to do that, but sometimes I failed. But walking in the door, on the right-hand side, there was a big bowl, and it was just filled with pharmaceuticals. And part of the party was you walked in and grabbed a handful of whatever was in the dish and ate it. So everybody was at different stages of intoxication, drug. It was a crazy time back then. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed serving the community. I really. I didn't want to arrest everybody. My attitude was try to help people as best I can. And that stayed with me for my whole career. It really helped my transition into community policing years later. But I did, that kind of 911 response, which, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I truly believe that's the core, the essence of policing. It's where people have to make decisions right off the top of their head in the middle of an emergency without the benefit of hindsight. And I always tried not to second guess somebody who is operating on what they can see in front of them and making decisions in the moment. So I try to always keep that in mind because I used to do that,
So you never worked for the press at all?
No, I did not. I did not until I retired. So yeah, did that for a couple of years on the calls for service, and then I went into the Vice and Narcotics unit of the police department, and this was in the early '80s, 82 or so, and of course, George Bush had declared the war on drugs, and we were the warriors on that, and we saluted smartly and went out and thought that the way we could reduce drug dealing was to arrest as many people as we could. And after doing that for 7 or 8 years, the frustration was was kind of building up, and I realized that trying to arrest your way out of it. We were in the city of Lowell, Massachusetts.
It was a wholesale failure.
Yeah.
The war on drugs.
Yeah, it really was.
Wholesale failure.
Yep, and we went into it with good intentions,
Right.
and I still want to put drug dealers in jail. Like I don't have any sympathy for people that are plying that trade and destroying people's lives. But I got to see it close up, day after day, and I it got frustrating after a while. We were doing cases in New York City. We confiscated 28 kilos of cocaine that came out of New York. We confiscated kilos of heroin. We did cases in Miami Beach. I sent officers down to the Dominican Republic at one point because we had a new
A
surge.
lot of that stuff probably came out of where I had my second precinct in New York, Washington Heights.
Well, Roosevelt Avenue is where we did that big case.
That's in Queens.
In Queens, yeah. But I was sitting on Roosevelt Avenue underneath the elevated railway doing surveillance on these really legitimate bad guys.
My friend Jimmy, who was in the DEA task force with the New York State Police,
Yep.
was doing the same thing.
Yep, down on Roosevelt Avenue.
Yeah, he was working in Queens.
Yeah, it was wide open there. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was pretty wild.
yeah. It was an exciting experience. There were a lot of homicides that occurred around the drug trade. We took off a guy for 2 kilos of cocaine, and they came up from Miami and executed him in a small apartment. Even though he tried to say that he had been arrested and that police took it, they killed him anyway. So there was no sympathy among those bad guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ed, but I just, I gotta get this in. As you know, I lost my daughter to fentanyl poisoning
I'm so
a
sorry.
couple of years ago. And in 2025, if you're selling fentanyl, there is a 100% chance that you're going to kill somebody. And unfortunately, law enforcement and society in general looks at that as just another overdose. Well, if you fire a gun into a crowd, that's called reckless, right? And you get prosecuted, and it could be for murder, right? Recklessly causing that murder. It's the same thing with fentanyl. There's an absolute chance that you're going to kill somebody, and those overdoses on those opioids need to be investigated as murders, because we got to get that bad guy, get him off the street, make an example. We got to make this go away.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I have a lot of compassion for families that have gone through this. I've known hundreds of them in my...
Everybody
in my life.
knows something.
Yeah, and
Everybody
they're
knows
just
something.
one of the latest victims.
Yeah.
It's horrible. But I think there really has to be a measured approach of being very strict on enforcement for dealers and being very compassionate on people that are addicted to try to get them off it. And, we used to send prostitutes to state prison and they'd get cleaned up for the 6 months or a year that they were in there. Unfortunately, when they get back out on the street, they go right back to the stuff. So it is a revolving door and needs to be addressed.
This is one of the things that I realized a long time ago. I have never arrested a burglar who was not a heroin junkie.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah.
by arresting them for burglary and putting them in jail, we're not fixing their problem. Their problem is the heroin.
Yep.
Okay.
It drives everything else.
Yeah. So, I'm a believer, and some people might be surprised, we're not just hard-ass cops,
Right.
right? We understand what works and what doesn't work. But that
because
person needs treatment.
Yeah, we've seen it. We've been on the street with the people involved, and frankly, we put a lot of people in treatment. When we were on the narcotics unit.
Yeah, the drug courts, I think, do make a difference. But that's that. The doorbell rings. My friend says, "Hey, Gary, open it. Get the door for me." And I open the door, and I see the biggest man I've ever seen in my life. It's Luca Brazzi come to life.
When you become a police commissioner or the superintendent here in Chicago or a police chief in a town in the United States, you are now not one of the boys anymore. You're not one of the members of the department. You're expected to hold them accountable and support them, especially support them, but also that's exactly right. Yeah.
Ed, just tell me a little bit more about your career, and then we'll move into some of the stories that we want to tell.
Sure. Around the same time we were doing those narcotics cases with the organized traffickers from South America and the islands, we were also working on traditional organized crime cases that you know a lot about being in New York.
No, I don't know the cases. I know the guys.
You know the guys.
I got a good
the players. Yeah,
I got a good story for you.
I can't wait to hear that. Yeah. So the LCN, La Cosa Nostra groups, the Patriarcha crime family, and the Irish mob up in Boston, a guy named Whitey Bulger, were our targets for a long time. And I worked with the DEA agents and the state police, and then the FBI, who were able to eventually put this guy behind bars. But it was a decades-long process, and the saga of Whitey Bulger, he turned out to be a dark, terrible murdering criminal in the Boston area who really ran roughshod over South Boston. But he came from a family that was well respected and politically powerful in the city. And there was a dichotomy there that was really shocking to all of us. So had a lot of stories about how that affected Boston politics and corruption and things like that. But we were in the core of that.
It was the same thing here in Chicago.
I can imagine.
Same thing here in Chicago. I got to tell a story real quick.
Please.
It's hysterical. It's New Year's Eve, probably 1979, and my friends and I go out to a couple of parties. We go back to one of my friends' houses whose stepfather was, how do you say it, in the Army. He was away for a little while, and it turns out he was hooked up with the mob. And his sister, oh, by the way, his mother at 2 o'clock in the morning is making meatballs for us. It was great.
That's great.
And his sister comes home, and her hair is a little askew, and she's got a little mark on her face. And it turns out she got into a fight with some guy at a club. And the next thing I saw was the beautiful mother making meatballs turned into somebody else. And she picks up the phone, she makes a phone call, and she's cursing like a sailor, and she slams down the phone. And about 5 minutes later, I'm walking past the door, and the doorbell rings. And my friend says, "Hey, Gary, open it and get the door for me." And I open the door, and I see the biggest man I've ever seen in my life. It's Luca Brasi come to life.
Oh, isn't that fun?
Quite frankly, he's got the white brim fedora, he's got the black tie, the black shirt, the black overcoat with the white scarf. Comes in, doesn't say a word. Mother's cursing like a sailor, and he finally doesn't say a word, finally goes, "Hey," and she stops. And he says these words that stuck with me forever. He says, "What does this kid's father do for a living?" And she says, "He's a bookie over on Bronxwood Avenue." He just puts up his hand and he leaves. 10 minutes later, the kid is at the door begging forgiveness.
Yeah, I was kidding her. Yeah. Yeah.
Legit.
Yep. That's the way it worked back then.
Uncle Big Boy was his name.
That sounds like a cartoon, but I like it.
But it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I saw it. I saw it up close and personal.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we had bookies working in every bar room, over 100 bar rooms in Lowell. And bookies worked there, and we would follow them and find the places where they would pay off their bets on Saturday morning. And then we went up on telephones and listened to how their operation was conducted. And it was really an exciting time. And we got into the core. I testified in federal court as an expert on organized crime activities and how the money really fueled other things. So the bookie money would oil the organization, but then they would do armed robberies of banks. They'd do armored car heists.
Sure.
It was really a fascinating experience.
You know, you watch Goodfellas, and that's all true stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, and that's fascinating. I never got to do any of that. I was in patrol virtually my whole career, except for 2 years that I spent in internal affairs as a captain.
Yeah.
Because we had a scandal, and they were trying to change internal affairs and put street cops into internal affairs. And that's the only time I did investigations. I would have loved to do some of that stuff, but never got the opportunity.
Yeah. It was
Plus, I got promoted too quickly.
Yeah.
You know? So,
well, I'll tell you a funny story. I went to school to climb telephone poles and do wiretapping of these organized crime figures. So I was pretty good at connecting up the wires and finding the appearance points and doing that technical stuff. And when I became chief, as an interim chief, the guys would still call me and say, "Hey, we need help on doing this." So they put me in a van, an undercover van, and we drove into my neighborhood actually, and found a box, a junction box that has the appearance point in it that we needed for the wiretap in the lease line. And we would open the doors up, and I would step out of the van and sort of duck down in between the doors and test and find the appearance points. And while I'm down on my knees trying to find the appearance points, a neighbor comes walking by, and he says, "Hey, Chief, how you doing?" So I got up and I said, good. And I went to the detectives. I said, I got to get out of this business. I'm just too well known at this point in time. So,
Nice. Well,
yeah.
but you were the chief there for a long time, 12 years.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like? How do you, I don't want to say reinvent yourself, but
Yeah.
you put your stuff in place, you run your drill, 3 years down the road, it's working. What do you do now?
Well, I had been assigned to federal and state task forces, and I was out of the department for a period of time. We had our own office in Lowell, but in a different place. I didn't even go to the police station for a number of years. And during the course of that time, the police department became very, very brutal, and the civil liability had gone off the charts. Supervision had broken down in the department. There were some really tough guys out there that were running roughshod over the community, and they were being sued, and millions of dollars were being paid by the city. So they asked me to come back to try to fix that. So when you look at my tenure there, it started off in that sort of crucible of corruption and violence and brutality, and I was brought in to get the police department back where they should be, and internal affairs, all of the things, working with the prosecutors at the federal level. It took a long time to sort of right the ship. And I like to think that during the first 4 or 5 years there, I was able to weed out some bad apples, but also make it a high-performing police department and embrace community policing at the same time. And when we did that, Gary, the crime numbers started to drop. I mean, the crime had gone up every year I was in the police department. Even through all the time I was arresting all these drug dealers, it still kept climbing. It wasn't until we reached out to the community that we started to see 5% drops. And in the 12 years that I was there, I had an over 50% reduction in Part 1 crimes.
Wow.
So it was pretty rewarding, actually.
Yeah, I could see that. And I talked about it. I think I talked about it on the show. But when I got to Chicago, I found that there were 3 different police departments who were over-specialized.
Yeah.
I do the enforcement police, I do the community outreach police, and I do the radio runs. I handle 911 calls.
Yep.
And that's totally dysfunctional.
Right.
Because, you put 2 officers in the same beat every day, they could do all 3 of those functions.
Right.
You know the good kids from the bad kids, you know the bad guys from the good guys. And that's at the baseline, I think, of what we need to do in policing. But we get away from it. It's too easy to create a unit.
Yeah.
Why do you need a community affairs unit?
Yeah.
You got a guy who's supposed to be on your beat every single day.
Right. Yeah.
Right? That should be a community affairs.
Why do you need a community policing unit? Absolutely. It shouldn't be a specialty. It should be a philosophy.
Yeah.
But I got to thank you for having me up here right after I retired. I went to work for the Justice Department, did some work in Ferguson, did some work here in Chicago on crime reduction strategies, and trying to implement some of the Boston experiences we had. And you were tremendous. You brought me in. You let me sit at your CompStat meetings in Chicago. I got to meet the leadership of the department. I met guys like Bobby Tracy, who's become one of my closest friends now. You both are
and he's
very close to me.
He is, Bill Bratton talks about the fact that there was a time when you could throw a dart and you would come up with a leader.
Yeah.
Chuck Ramsey, yourself, Charlotte Beck, just go down the list.
Yeah.
Kathy Lanier. I mean, it just goes on. And Bill Bratton talks about the fact that there's really not that one individual out there. I think Bobby could be that guy.
Oh, without a doubt.
What Bobby's doing in St. Louis right now is remarkable.
It's remarkable. He did an incredible job in Wilmington.
And it's the program that we've been developing for years, I didn't create it. We took it from New York. We took it to Newark. We took it to Chicago, and it works every way you do it.
We copied it from New York. Bill was a mentor to me, Joe Bratton. But I got to work with Mike Moore and Charlie Beck and these real, Chuck Ramsey, Chuck came out of Chicago originally.
Yeah.
But I've been a fan of his and emulated him for many years. So we've got the solutions down. Unfortunately, the political winds change, and it gets complicated on both sides of the equation.
Without a doubt. I was so disappointed after my time out from policing, and I went back to a conference, and they were talking about DEI instead of crime reduction. That's all we talked about.
Right.
We'd go to breakfast. We'd talk about it. Ed, how you doing? Well, my robberies are up, but my murders are down. No, Ed, how are you doing?
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, you're right.
Right.
Yeah. It was a scene of devastation. It reminded me of 9/11, actually, the way people were clutching each other in the street, and it was total chaos. I remember looking at a TV like the second day into the incident, and out in front of Yankee Stadium is a big sign that said, "God bless the Red Sox in the city of Boston." And I looked at it and I thought to myself, oh my God, this is a big deal. Like, if they put that out there, like, this is bigger than I thought it was. All of the things that happened in the country created a problem that we really had to address, and we needed to correct our actions and take responsibility for some of the things that happened. But just like everything else, the pendulum can go too far.
Yeah.
And when you start letting quality of life sort of take that off the table as an issue, the public rejects that. They will eventually be upset when you have open homelessness and disorder. That George Kelling was so brilliant. I was so blessed to work with George Kelling and David Kennedy and Anthony Braga. Yeah, they did the work.
You see that, and I think that there's I don't know what's going on as far as academia and policing anymore, but I do know that when we were at the top of our games, we were involved with the Tracy Mears and the George Kellings
Right.
and the David Kennedys. And I talked about it on the show. I said, my partner, Joe Esposito, used to say that I was half cop and half egghead, because I was looking to all these things that we're going to try and do. And guess what? It worked.
Yeah, those are the people that have the answers. I was
They're
37 years old.
practitioners,
Right.
even
Well,
though they're academics.
It's called action research, and
There you go.
they practice that, and it makes a big difference. What could you be a doctor if you didn't look at the medical schools and the lessons they were learning? So,
Well, let's move up to Boston. Let's talk. No, I'm not moving up to
oh,
Boston.
come on out. Hey,
No.
we let a couple of New York guys in every once in a while.
Well, I'm good. I'm good. But it's funny. The remarkable parallels that are striking to me when Charlie Beck sat in that chair and we had this conversation. It was remarkable to me that his dad was a cop. He was a World War II veteran. Charlie's kids are cops, and all the similarities that I have with my friends.
Yeah.
And these are great friends. I mean, Charlie Beck, when I had my heart attack, he reached out to me and I said, Charlie, I'm okay, and I have a doctor's certification that I actually have a heart.
We
And-
questioned that from.
And he responded immediately. He said, yeah, that's great. We have a piano in my house, but nobody plays it. Just like that. And you, my friend,
Yeah.
sent me a text saying stents, because I had 2 stents put in. Stents? Real men have bypassed
That's
and multiple horns.
exactly, and that was my experience. Heart disease runs in my family, and I paid the price for it.
That's the love between us all. But let's talk a little bit about Boston, because that's we all have those seminal moments in our careers. Mine was 9/11. Yours was the Boston bombing, as it's called, or the marathon, and that's how you became a movie star too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah. So
a movie star.
let's talk.
I'm a character actor at best.
Let's talk about that event, because, and one of the things that people should know is that when you have these relationships across the country, when events happen, like, for instance, Jim McDonnell is a great friend of all of ours.
Yeah.
Is the LA chief now.
Yep.
And when he got out to LA, the next thing you knew, he had the fires.
Right.
And I'm sure you reached out to him.
Oh, sure. Talked to him a
"Hey,
couple
Jim,
times. Yeah.
stay strong. Let me know if I could do anything," stuff like that.
Yep.
And then back to back, now he's got those riots going on, and he's stuck between the president and his mayor. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's not an enviable position. And we have those relationships, and they're very helpful.
Yeah.
And when, not to steal anything that you're going to say, but as soon as the Boston bombings happened, I reached out to Ed and asked him if he needed anything. And he said, "No, I think we're okay." And I said, "Well, all right, I'm going to send you a sergeant and 10 detectives." He says, "Well, I don't know if we need them." I said, "Well, they're in the air right now, So I don't know if we can return them right now.
And we accepted them willingly. It was great. That's the kind of camaraderie that happens. You know, you mentioned the Major City Chiefs. The meetings that we go to, the camaraderie that we have with our colleagues was a bit of a catharsis for us, because when you become a police commissioner or the superintendent here in Chicago, or a police chief in a town in the United States, you are now not one of the boys anymore. You're not one of the members of the department. You're expected to hold them accountable and support them, you know, especially support them, but also that's exactly right. Yeah. And so it's kind of a lonely position.
Sure.
Going to those meetings not only forges great friendships, but it gives you the ability to see that I'm not the only one going through
We're going
this.
through the same thing.
Yeah.
And whether it's Newark, New York, Los Angeles, Boston.
Yeah.
And,
It was a great experience.
but the other thing is sharing successes and how we do what works best.
Right.
Our gang strategy that we implemented here in Chicago, that was the most successful thing that we did, that got us to the numbers we had in 2013 and 2014, which were the lowest numbers since 1962, came almost directly from Charlie Beck in Los Angeles.
Yep.
About preventing the next shooting once it happens.
Right.
The detectives on the scene are thinking about, where's the retaliation going to happen?
Yep.
And that's where we would send our resources.
Well, I got to tell you a funny story about working together. I'm driving down Blue Hill Avenue, and I get a call. There's a shooting that's just occurred maybe a half mile in front of me. So we race up to the scene, and by the time I get there, there's 2 or 3 people shot. The suspect is in the wind. But I see 5 or 6 guys in detective cars that I don't know who they are. And I get out and I go, what's going on? Every one of them was a New York City police detective. They had been up working with our intelligence unit and happened to be right on top of the shooting when it happened. So NYPD and Boston PD worked together hand in glove. It's been a great experience. That's why I have so much respect for you. And, you know, speaking of the marathon, I can remember when the first thing that happened in the middle of this pursuit, you know, the bombing happens. We've got people who were killed. We're desperate to run these characters down who did this. And I remember looking at a TV like the second day into the incident, and out in front of Yankee Stadium is a big sign that said, "God bless the Red Sox" in the city of Boston. And I looked at it and I thought to myself, oh my God, this is a big deal. Like, if they put that out there, like, this is bigger than I thought it was. You know, even though we were right in the middle of it, it was the sympathy we got out of New York and the NYPD after that happened was just amazing.
The rivalry is fun.
Yeah, it is.
That's right. You know, and back in the day, it wasn't so much fun.
No,
I actually
when we were losing,
I had to save a couple of Red Sox fans in Yankee Stadium
I saw that happen
on more than one or two occasions.
I was there once when a guy got beat pretty bad.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
But talk about September of 2013.
Right. Oh, no. It was April 15th,
April,
2014.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
April.
It was, tax day. I'll never forget it.
Patriots Day.
Yep, Patriots Day in Boston, tax day, and the Boston Marathon is run in that second week of April. And it's a great community group, and it's an international sporting event for the first hour, because you got people that have come in from all over the world. International media are up on the bridge taking pictures of everything. And then the elite runners come across, and the governor crowns the elite runners, the mayor crowns the elite runners, the handicap group comes across. And it's just incredible. It's a really exciting international sporting event. But then in the second hour, and for the remainder of the day, it becomes very much a local race, right? It's all Boston people and people from all over the country, but it's a big celebration. Everybody's cheering on the groups from out at BC and BU. They run right by the colleges, and it's a very, very festive day. One of the first things in spring that we do in Boston. So I was there at the beginning, and I had my buddies, 3 kids with me. They came from Maine. My buddy was with the state police, and we had been in a task force together, and I brought them down, and I put them in the VIP sections of the stand so they could watch the race. And then I had to leave to take a phone call with the president, actually. The vice president at the time, Joe Biden, had pulled 4 or 5 of us together in a phone conference to try to help with some legislation they were trying to get through. So I go home and I take the call, and my driver is still outside. my intention is to come back. It's a holiday, but I'd still come back to see the end of the race. And my phone rings just as I get off the phone with the White House. And it's my chief of department, Dan Linsky. And he said, Commissioner, we've had 2 explosions at the finish line. So I said, what kind of explosions, Danny? Were they electrical? Because we had electrical problems in that area in the grid. And he said, no. He said, Danny Keeler, who's one of our most experienced sergeants, homicide detective, been in shootouts, just a solid guy. He said, Danny Keeler is screaming for all the ambulances he can get, and he's talking about multiple amputations. And so the hair stood up on the back of my head because, first of all, Danny Keeler doesn't scream.
Doesn't scream.
And so I ran out the door. I said to my wife and kids, I don't know what's going on, but I probably won't see you today. And I jumped in the car and I raced to the scene. And we were there in under 10 minutes. And it was a scene of devastation. It reminded me of 9/11, actually, the way people were clutching each other in the street. And it was total chaos. I drive down the end of Ring Road where I had already called the state police the state police SWAT team, the FBI SWAT team, and our SWAT team, and had them rally on Ring Road. And as I drove down Ring Road, I stepped out of the car, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was stepping out right in front of the bomb seat of the second explosion. And when I put my feet down on the ground, I could feel shrapnel, tacks, and BBs under my feet. And I knew immediately that it was a improvised explosive device. My uncle had been killed in Korea from one of those. I had studied them with FBI bomb specialists over the years. I knew what I had, and the damage went up 2 stories. And lying on the ground on my left were Lindsay Liu, who was a BU graduate student, and Martin Richards. She was only in her early 20s. And Martin Richards was an 8-year-old boy who had been killed immediately in the blast, and both bodies were on the ground. And, you know, when you have that moment where you look at the scene and you realize the ramifications of what you're seeing, and the realization that we didn't stop this. We'd stopped terrorist plots before, and we were very good, and we thought we had it covered. But these guys got through us. And I remember taking a minute and saying a prayer and sort of also understanding the gravity of what I was seeing in the aftermath that I was about to face. And but one thing, besides saying a prayer, one thing that really encouraged me was we had a good plan. We had a very sophisticated plan that had taken a year to put together. I had read it before I left the office. I knew it was solid, and I was encouraged by that, and it gave me the strength to prosecute an aggressive investigation against these 2 guys.
So that's the initial response, which is, I don't know what the right word is. What's the right adjective? It's terrifying,
Overwhelming.
intimidating, overwhelming.
Yeah.
And
also
and Tag, you're it.
Angry. Like the anger plays a role in this. And I had 2,000 really angry police officers that day who wanted to do nothing but run these guys down. You know, we're in a shootout with these guys right now, and they're throwing bombs at us. And I sat bolt upright in the bed, and I said, I'd never heard that in American policing, that they're throwing bombs at us. It just wasn't something I had even considered a possibility.
I'm sitting in my living room one day, and I'm watching TV, and a commercial comes on for Patriots Day. And Mark Wahlberg and blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden they show John Goodman as Ed Davis. And I was like, what? Stop. As you're talking and describing this, I'm thinking about my 9/11 experience.
Yeah.
And the other word that we had that you're not articulating is confusion, because we didn't know what the hell was going on.
Right. Well, yeah.
And you know, in my mind, myself, my partner Joe Espo, and the rest of us were thinking, what's next? Are they going to come up out of the subway with machine guns? Right?
Yep.
We don't know.
Right.
And you know, that's why we went right to tactical, thinking about rescue and recovery and tactical all at the same time.
Yep.
So that's where it starts.
Yeah. Well, I was in Philadelphia. I was in Atlantic City when the towers got hit. I made it up to Philadelphia, and I had to have a cruiser come down from Lowell to pick me up. But I remember watching it at the hotel in downtown Philly as the towers collapsed, and thinking to myself, we're in a whole different world right now. And frankly, it was much more complex and complicated than what we faced in
It was
Marathon.
It was different.
But the country stood up and did what needed to be done. It shows the resiliency,
Yeah.
and reminded me of what my parents used to talk about when they experienced World War II. It was
Yeah.
our World War
Pearl
II,
Harbor.
Garrett. Yeah. Pearl Harbor is what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so now talk a little bit about the investigation, how you started to run these guys down. I know there was video involved, all sorts of investigative steps, and
Yeah.
take us through basically a day by day if you can,
Sure.
because the event lasted 5 days. I'm not sure people remember that.
Yeah.
Because now it's, what are we talking, 12 years in the past, right?
Yeah. 12 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the first step is always to rescue and recover victims, and we did that very quickly. We had the scene cleared in 20 minutes of all the hundreds of people that were injured, multiple, like dozens of amputations. Physicians from Boston City Hospital and Mass General and Brigham and Women's were not only on the scene, but staffed the emergency rooms, and 42 people left there in critical condition, and not one of the people who left the scene died.
Wow.
So it was a real testament to the level 1 trauma centers
Sure.
that we had in the city, and we have a multitude of them. We were very lucky in that regard.
It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, but then almost immediately, it's really important to establish command posts and get some organization around the hundreds. I ended up responding to 9/11 about 2 weeks later, and I was up by the United Nations with guys from your department, and they told me the stories about how difficult it was to have self-reporting of police officers, and that had to be controlled. So we set up catchment zones for those officers to go to Boston Common and to be available in case we did get a follow-on attack, which is what we expected too. We didn't know what we had.
Yeah.
So, but the command post was really critical. We set it up in the Westin Hotel. It was in a huge room, and at the time we had no communication. All of our cell phones had shut down. We had our two-way radios; those still worked.
I used my Nextel. That's the
Yeah.
one and only time I used my Nextel was on 9/11,
Yeah.
reporting back what was going on,
No
because
kidding.
the radios were jammed.
Yeah.
The antenna for our cell phones was on top of the North Tower,
Yeah.
which was now gone. I'm sorry. Go
No, that's all right. No, it's funny. Nextel was really an innovative experience for us in the narcotics unit, and I got to meet the guy that established that company years later. And I said, how did that ever go away? That was the best tool we ever had. So I'm glad to hear that it worked in that environment.
That one particular
Yeah.
day, it was
Yeah.
invaluable. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way.
Yeah, so we started to send people out to hospitals to take statements. We sent state troopers to the airports to confiscate any video or audio that people had on them from the scene. We were taking statements of. There was one kid whose both legs were blown off. Jeff was in the emergency room, and my detectives came back to the command post, and they showed me the first day. They showed me a very accurate composite picture of Tamerlan Tsarnaev, who we didn't catch until 4 days later. But this young kid, Jeff, despite the fact that the doctors were still amputating his legs, was able to give them a solid description and fill out a composite that we used in the investigation. So incredible bravery and courage was exhibited that day.
So where did the break start?
The president was coming to visit the city, and the mayor was still in the hospital. So he asked me to go meet the president of Air Force One. So I drove out there with the governor, and we greeted the Air Force One with the president and the Massachusetts delegation. And they were going to a memorial service that was happening at the cathedral in South End. And the mayor was going to go there and meet the president there, but we helped escort him from the airport through the tunnels.
Was
into
that
downtown.
Menino was the mayor?
Yeah, Mayor
the time?
Thomas Menino was my boss at the time, and a tremendous guy. Matter of fact, Saturday, I go to the dedication of the convention center in South Boston. It's going to be dedicated in his name.
Oh, good.
So he's still a very important historical figure in the city. And we worked very closely together during the course of this. I could not have done it without guidance. And you know, he's the one that activated all of the support services that we needed around the victims and their families. And the One Fund, which they established like a day after the explosion, was the most successful per capita fundraising that was ever done in the United States on an incident like that. So he's a very committed guy and a very important figure in my life. But I got a call as I was going over to meet the president that they had a picture. And Paul Fitzgerald, one of my superintendents, was at the FBI command post, which had now been set up in FBI headquarters downtown. And they had been processing video over the last 3 days. The woman in charge of that for the FBI, Kimberly, I hired her. She was a supervisory special agent with the FBI, and now she works for me. But she ran that facility processing the video, and actually was part of the team that put that group together, and was able to put the picture first of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev out, because Dzhokhar was...
But I remember White Hat, right?
White Hat was Dzhokhar,
yeah.
And he was the one that put the bomb down right behind Martin Richard.
Okay.
He knew he was going to blow that family up. The Richard family was there. Martin died. His sister Jane lost her left leg, and their mother was partially blinded by the attack. So these are the kind of animals that we're dealing with in these things. But then we got a picture of Tamerlan a little later. And when we released those photographs, there was a big debate about whether or not we could release them. The feds wanted to keep them secret. I wanted my officers to see who these guys were in case they ran into them. And sure enough...
I figured they were not in Boston at that point.
Me too. I talked to a contact of the CIA who said a good close friend of mine, he said, how, Stone, are you going to get these guys? And I said, oh, we'll find out who they are, but you're going to get them. These guys are overseas.
When those photographs came out, I got to tell you this story. So Patriots Day was a Monday, right? Yep. My FBI SAC, great guy, calls me up and he says, hey, boss, I'll let you know what we got. Right now, we don't have anything. Tuesday, he calls me. He says, why don't you come on over? We'll go sit in our skiff, which is where you can exchange secret information. And he gives me some international stuff that they think they're working on. That's Tuesday. Wednesday, calls me. He says, no, nothing's changed. Thursday, he says, why don't you come on over? And we got some stuff. And it really didn't amount to a whole heck of a lot. And I think it was Thursday, I go back to my office, I turn on the TV, and I see a press conference with the two pictures of the Tsarnaev brothers.
Right, yeah.
And I called my FBI guy, and I said, why didn't you tell me about this?
Right.
He says, well, I didn't know about it.
Right.
And
they were keeping it very close to the vest.
Yeah. And you know what? There was a connection to Chicago.
Yeah.
I think the older brother was a long-range trucker.
Yeah.
And he came out here and picked up a friend of his and went down to Florida to do some MMA fighting or something like that.
Yeah, he was a boxer. Yeah.
And they didn't, I don't know. Anyway.
They have different priorities. Their priority is the case and something called the dialogue, which is their process of including someone or excluding them from an investigation. It's very bureaucratic. And if local police departments had to operate like that, they couldn't get much done. But they were trying to protect the information. And I had a big blowout with the U.S. attorney at the time, who happens to be a very close friend of mine. But we totally disagreed on this. And I said to her, I want to know who made that decision. And she said it was a deputy attorney general in Washington. So I said, give me his name. So I wrote the name down. And everybody at the table, there must have been 30 people around the table, they all looked at me and they said, why do you want his name? And I said, I want everybody here to know that if these guys attack and we don't catch them because we couldn't put these pictures out, I'm going to go public with this and blame that assistant deputy attorney general. And I was the skunk at that lawn party. I was the only one speaking up to get the pictures out. But I really thought my people deserved to have those photographs in their hands.
Well, and then look at what happened after that, right? Is that when the MIT cop gets shot?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Now, would it have made a difference? I'm not blaming anyone.
We don't know.
Well, I'm not blaming anyone on the death of Sean Collier. He was killed when these guys snuck up on him, and he really didn't have a chance. They executed him.
Right.
But I will tell you that if I hadn't got the pictures out there before that, I would have felt extremely guilty.
Yes.
So it was good that you saw them and we were able to get them out later that day. And Rick Delorier, who was the SAC from the FBI, to his credit, he called me back after the meeting and he said, "I've been thinking about this." It was like 3:00 in the morning. He said, "I've been thinking about this all night, Eddie. You're right. We got to get those pictures out there." And he worked all day from Wednesday to Thursday to get them out.
All right. So now we end up with Sean Collier, right? Getting
Right.
assassinated, and now it's on, right?
Right.
What happens then?
Well, we put the pictures out, and I went to bed after 4 days of being up and I was only sleeping 1 or 2 hours a night.
Sure.
I crashed about 9:00, and with the full confidence that we would have IDs on these guys because the pictures were so good. And nothing. We put them out about 5:00. When I fell asleep at 9, we hadn't heard anything. I couldn't believe it, but I went to sleep. And about 11:30, the phone rang, and it was Dan Linsky again. I was getting sick of hearing from this guy. And he said,
Danny doesn't mean it.
no, he's one of my
Dan-
dearest friends.
Dan-
Yeah,
great.
yeah, great guy. He said, "Commissioner, we're in a shootout with these guys right now, and they're throwing bombs at us." And I sat bolt upright in the bed, and I said, "What do you?" I'd never heard that in American policing, that
Yeah.
they're throwing bombs at us. It just wasn't something I had even considered a possibility. But they were engaged in a heated gun battle with these guys, and it was, that Danny Ming was carjacked, and I got to meet Danny and have dinner with him when the movie was being produced up in Beverly Hills, and what a tremendous hero he was, because they kidnapped him only for his car. They were to kill him and then drive to New York and blow up the subway station. And if it wasn't for Danny's courage and heads-up play to roll out of the car under the threat of gunfire and get away, and then miraculously remember the code for the GPS tracker on his brand new Mercedes-Benz vehicle. He said to the cops that the tracker number is 123456, and the cops said, "How do you know that?" And he said, I go to MIT, I remember numbers. It was one of the light moments of the whole pursuit. But that tracking number got OnStar on the car. They fed the information to the police. The Watertown police in a heads-up play spotted it, and were able to stop it and have this terrible pitched gun battle and explosions and everything else.
And the younger brother ran over the older brother with
Yeah.
the contact vehicle, right?
Yeah, so
Gee, that's
they were holding off. You're from the military, so you know a 360-degree ambush is not a good idea. And that's what we had set up, because people came from all over, and they all started to shoot at this guy who was shooting at them. But the
I
bullets...
almost got shot in one of those.
Yeah. Well, me too. I think everybody in policing has been almost clipped by friendly fire. But one of our officers, one of the MBTA police, was shot in the pelvis and basically bled out. He got to the hospital and they saved his life. His name is Dick Donahue, a real hero. He happened to be Sean Collier's classmate in the police academy.
Oh my God.
So we thought we lost him there for a period of time. But I got to mention one guy, Jeff Puglisi, who now works for me in my company. Jeff was a former military guy, was assigned to Germany in the Army, and he was the armorer for the police department. Jeff saw the gun battle. He responded from a private paid detail, saw the gun battle, got out of his car, and pulled a flanking maneuver on the bad guys, jumped a couple of fences, came up on the side of them, and started to exchange gunfire with Tamerlan. And he couldn't get Tamerlan because Tamerlan was behind cover of a car, but he realized that if he did something called skip shooting, which I had never heard of until this happened, if you hit the pavement with a bullet, it goes straight. And he used that skip shooting technique and hit Tamerlan in his ankles.
Oh, wow.
And it hurt.
Yeah.
And Tamerlan came out from behind cover, and they started walking towards each other like the Old West, shooting at each other. And unfortunately for Tamerlan, his shots went high. They're you could see them in a white clapboard house there. They went all around Jeff, by the grace of God. But Jeff was a really good shot, and he shot Tamerlan in the chest multiple times. That knocked him to the ground. He was still fighting. They tried to pull the gun off him, and somebody yelled, and Jeff looked up and saw the car, which was now being driven by Joe Carr, his brother, coming at the police officers. He was trying to run the police officers over who were holding the brother down. The cops jumped out of the way. Tamerlan got hit and dragged underneath Joe Carr's car. And then Joe Carr had to stop and back up to go around him. And he was left in a puddle of blood on the ground. So,
That,
ironic end.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, me too.
Well, that's unbelievable, Ed.
It's quite a story, and it's really what got Peter Berg interested in the case. When he heard Jeff explain what happened, Peter Berg was one of the great American directors. I think that was the minute that they decided they were going to do this movie.
And that's how you became a star.
That's how I became. That's how I ended up in Beverly Hills. Hard to believe, you know.
Well, just like Ed got me with the stent comment, I got him back on this one because I'm sitting in my living room one day and I'm watching TV and a commercial comes on for Patriots Day and Mark Wahlberg and blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden they show John Goodman as Ed Davis. And I was like, what? Stop. I took a picture of it and I sent it to Ed right away.
Me too.
I didn't say a word.
Yeah.
I just sent him the picture, and his response was, if you've got Goodman, I got nothing.
I got to tell you, he's a quintessential actor, one of the great actors of the American scene,
No,
and a tremendous guy. I went out for dinner with him a number of times, him and his wife. Just wonderful people. So I couldn't be more thrilled that he was selected to pick me.
and he gave me one of my favorite ball busting.
Yeah, exactly. Neither of us are the most handsome guys in the world, but I do like to say that Tom Selleck was busy. So
Yeah, well, yeah, and Brad Pitt was off.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
So after the shootout happened, we launched the biggest manhunt that had ever in the history of the Boston Police Department. It involved police from all over New England, Massachusetts State Police, FBI, and Boston Police and SWAT team. And we realized who we had at that point in time. The FBI had come in and said that Joe Carr and Tamerlan were on their radar before this incident happened. They had investigated them because of a letter that they received from the FSU in Russia, who had identified them as terrorists. And at the end of their investigation, they thought it was just misinformation from a hostile foreign intelligence service. But the Russians were right. And this Tamerlan had spent some time in the Caucasus, and they had identified him as a problem. So after they said that to us, at least we knew who we were after. We had pitches distributed, and we thought that he might have gone to ground somewhere in that area. So we set up a manhunt involving 4 sectors, with the center point being the car, the last point the car was seen at, and we spent all night searching for this guy and all day the next day. And we had a lockdown in the city where people were asked to stay home, and believe it or not, they did.
Shelter in place.
Yeah, and it wasn't an order. No one was arrested, but it was a request to stay inside the house, and I was shocked that most people agreed and did. So we had the community to ourselves, and we were going door by door, breaking down doors that were locked, going into garages, under cars, all the things that you see happening with SWAT teams doing that kind of a pursuit. And then President Obama called the governor, and I got a call from Deval Patrick, along with the mayor, and the governor said, the president is concerned about this lockdown. We got to wrap it up. How are you guys doing? So I said, well, let me check with the SWAT team. So I got back to him and I said, they're almost done. I said, we might need a little bit more time, but I think we can do it in the confines of what we've got, so you can announce that the lockdown is over. And ironically, it was the announcement that the lockdown was over that actually triggered the arrest, because
The guy found him.
yeah, and a guy that had been, forced to stay in the house all day. His wife wouldn't let him smoke inside the house. He really needed a cigarette. So when the lockdown came out, he walked out back and he started to have a cigarette and realized that the boat had the cover ripped off. And he looked in and he saw blood, and then he realized what he had. So he backed off and called us. And I'll never forget the call that we got. We're getting reports that the suspect is in a boat in Watertown. And I remember turning to my driver and saying, where is the water in Watertown? Like it's just a little river. I said, there's no boats in the river. Well, the boat was in a backyard.
Right,
It
right.
wasn't in I was thinking of a boat in the water someplace. So we raced back, and by the time we got back there, they had him pinned down. He had done some aggressive moves while the SWAT team was placing themselves up, and our communication wasn't really good. And one of the SWAT team officers on a roof saw the suspect pushing what he thought was a rifle barrel up through the plastic. So he fired one shot to sort of as a warning shot to pull the gun down. And when that one shot went off, everybody else, at least it wasn't a 360-degree ambush, it was a 180-degree ambush, but they all fired at the boat thinking that the suspect had shot. And there were over 100 rounds in that boat at the scene. So luckily, I suppose some people would have different opinions on it. I was glad that he was alive because he had written a manifesto inside the boat that confessed to the incident, said why he did it, and we were able to use that in trial.
Right.
And those kind of pieces of evidence would have been lost if he had been killed in that shooting incident. They got the shooting under control pretty quickly, and then the FBI hostage rescue team came in. Tremendous people, did an unbelievable job in helping secure him. Flashbangs were thrown in the boat. He refused to come out for a long period of time, but eventually he came out. And I remember my SWAT team commander, when I got to the scene, turned to me and he said, "Commissioner, see that boat?" And I saw the boat. It was riddled with bullets from stem to stern. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Don't buy that boat."
Cop humor.
Yeah, a couple of light moments in the middle of a terrible tragedy where people lost their limbs, are still suffering today over it. And it really was all about the victims. The mayor was right in concentrating on them. And I've got to know many of them in the years since, especially the Richards family. I've become very close to them. And it's a terrible thing that they went through because of these two twisted minds.
Oh, it's a terrible thing that you went through also. And we never take the time to recognize that. And, you know, I'm going to wrap this up like I always do, but I'm going to add a little caveat. What I always say is that a story like this, the twisted nature of the things that we have to deal with as police officers is never ending. You know, I'll never say that I've seen it all, right? Seen a lot,
Right.
but I haven't seen it all.
No.
And, you know, the next cop can see the next thing that everybody says, "I can't believe that just happened."
Yeah.
And that's why, in my mind, there's no more noble thing that a human being can do with their life than to be a police officer. But the caveat that I'm going to add is that without leadership, that case doesn't come to a conclusion the way it did.
Well,
And Ed, your leadership during that time, I mean, I was so proud of you. And I still am.
thank you. And I feel the same way with what you went through down there. For
A little
yeah,
bit. Oh, the TV.
yeah, for a Yankees guy, I get it. But the journey continues, and those men and women, my son is on the job as a detective right now, and I hear the stories all the time, and I have the greatest respect for what they do out there.
Yeah, and we have to.
Yep.
And you know, that's why I enjoy doing this show so much is showing what police officers go through. You know, we've had cops who've been shot, mothers of police officers who've been murdered, and it's just remarkable the resilience and the toughness of police officers and their families.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here, Red.
Congratulations on your success and for spreading the message, you know.
Well,
You're doing a tremendous job. my
Fine.
friend.
As you know, I've always had a big mouth.
Yeah, I like it. One of your most endearing qualities.
Well, we look forward to our next episode. We've got a whole bunch of them lined up for you, and please keep watching Wearing the Badge. Thank you.
Thank you.